Braden Dorsey didn't usually do events without an agenda, but here he was, dropping his pen onto a sign and sheet at a wine-tasting workshop like he hadn't just walked out of a boardroom that closed a $70 million acquisition. "Mr. Dorsey?" the hostess asked, blinking up at him from behind a sleek, modern podium. "You're enrolled for the flavor and finish tasting." "Apparently," he said, tugging at his cuffs. "Blame my assistant." She said I needed to unclench. He glanced around the rustic chic tasting room, wooden beams, candlelight flickering against glass decanters, and immediately regretted not canceling. There were no suits in sight. Just couples, laughing, swirling glasses like the world didn't run on pressure and deadlines. Before he could turn around and disappear, a warm, clear voice cut through the low hum of chatter. "Welcome, everyone. I'm Oriana Ames. I'll be guiding you through the tasting tonight." He looked up and everything slowed. She stood near the first table in a black silk blouse and jeans with a tear just above the knee. Her hair was twisted back loosely, a few strands falling around her cheek. Her eyes, a deep hazel, scanned the room with ease and quiet confidence. But it was her voice, low, steady, and teasing just under the surface, that made something shift inside of him. "Tonight, we're not just drinking wine," she continued, walking between the tables with a bottle in hand. "We're tasting it, listening to it, feeling it. If that sounds dramatic, good. Wine is drama in a glass." A few people chuckled. Braden didn't. He couldn't. His gaze followed her like she was gravity. "Let's start with a 2016 Brunello," she said, pouring a deep red into his glass as she passed. "Don't sniff it yet. Just look at it. Wine has body, depth, color. Like people, it tells you everything if you're willing to stop pretending you already know it." Braden raised a brow. "You talk about wine like it's alive." Oriana turned to him, one corner of her mouth lifting just slightly. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's just waiting for the right person to understand it." He didn't blink. She moved on, but the air around him stayed charged. He hadn't felt this kind of pull toward anyone in years. Maybe ever. By the second pour, he wasn't paying attention to the tasting notes. He was watching the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed, the way she leaned forward when someone asked a question, how her entire face lit up when she talked about wine like it was a secret language only she could translate. "You're not drinking," Oriana said quietly, suddenly at his side again. Braden looked down at his untouched glass. "I was watching." "That's not how this works," she said, amused. "Wine doesn't reveal itself to people who watch from a distance." He tilted his head. "Is that a metaphor?" She met his gaze, and for a moment the room faded away. Maybe. For the next hour he let her words wash over him. He drank. He tasted. But mostly he listened. And when the lights dimmed and the last wine was poured, Braden stayed in his seat long after the others started slipping out. The hostess approached. "Mr. Dorsey, we usually close by 10. He stood, adjusting the sleeves of his jacket. "Of course." But as he turned, Oriana blocked his path, wiping her hands on a towel tucked into her apron. "You stayed," she said, folding her arms. "You made wine sound like poetry." "I don't even like wine." She laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Then why come?" He hesitated, then said, "I haven't stopped thinking since I was 22. This forced me to." Her expression softened just a little. "You run a company?" He nodded. "Dorsey Enterprises. Real estate, tech, acquisitions. You know, cold, boring stuff." I wasn't going to say it. He grinned, and it surprised them both. She glanced down, then stepped aside. "Well, thanks for coming, Mr. Dorsey." "Braden," he corrected. "Call me Braden." She met his eyes again. "Oriana." "I know." He paused at the door, then turned. "Do you ever do private tastings?" Her brows lifted. "You want to book one?" "I want to book you." Her lips parted slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I don't date clients." "I'm not your client. You just asked for a private tasting. Then I'm asking for something else." He stepped closer. "Dinner." Oriana hesitated. "You're serious?" "I usually get accused of being too serious." She studied him. "One dinner." He nodded. "Tomorrow night." Her voice was cool, but her eyes sparkled. Text me the details. I don't text. I'll call. Properly. Oriana blinked. You don't text. I run $1 billion company. I don't have time to guess what people mean with emojis. Her laugh pulled something tight in his chest. When she finally walked away, Braden stepped out into the night with a strange feeling he couldn't name. And for the first time in years, he didn't check his phone. He just smiled. You're late, Oriana said as Braden stepped into the small, dimly lit bistro tucked between a flower shop and a vintage bookstore. Her voice was calm, but her eyes flicked to the minimalist clock on the wall. 7 o'clock sharp. Braden unbuttoned his dark coat, revealing a charcoal dress shirt that clung to his frame like it had been tailored by a man who understood architecture. My driver took the scenic route. I didn't argue. You have a driver? He pulled out the chair across from her. And Saturday, I have a lot of things. But right now, I'd rather talk about you. Oriana narrowed her eyes slightly, folding her napkin onto her lap. You don't strike me as the type who's used to waiting. I'm not. But some things deserve it. A server appeared with 2 menus and a bottle of red already breathing in a decanter. Oriana raised an eyebrow. I called ahead, Braden said before she could ask. I told them to choose something you wouldn't hate. So you did your research. I listened. She looked at him, then really looked. Most people in your orbit probably don't have the luxury of telling you no. Braden leaned forward, fingers laced together. Are you planning to? I haven't decided yet. The flicker of a smile touched the edge of his mouth, but he didn't press her. Instead, he poured her wine with a steady hand and waited as she lifted the glass, inhaled, then sipped. Not bad, she said. I'll take it. The server reappeared with a small plate of olives and warm bread. Oriana reached for one, tearing it gently, then asked, why wine? He tilted his head. You mean, why did I show up to that tasting? No. I mean, why did you stay longer than anyone else? Braden didn't answer right away. He folded his napkin, glanced out the window where rain had started to tap steadily against the glass, then met her gaze. Because you were the first person in a long time who said something I didn't already see coming. Oriana blinked once, slowly. That's either a compliment or a red flag. I'll let you decide. They ordered. She chose the mushroom risotto. He asked for the steak. Rare, and when the food arrived, the conversation didn't stall the way first dates often did. There were no polite silences or awkward questions. So what did you study? He asked as he cut into his steak. Organic chemistry. He looked up. Seriously. I wanted to make perfume. Scents, aromatics, reactions. Wine was a detour that stuck. Why didn't you go back? She chewed slowly, then swallowed. I was supposed to move to Paris. I got accepted into a graduate program. My mom got sick the same month. Braden's expression shifted, but he didn't offer pity, just quiet attention. She passed away 2 years ago, Oriana said. I stayed to take care of her. Then I stayed because I didn't know how to leave anymore. He nodded once. That's a good reason. Is it? It's honest. She let that sit for a moment, then looked at him. What about you? You don't exactly scream relaxation. I don't relax. Ever? Not until I watched you pour wine like it was a religion. The air between them tightened. Oriana leaned back slightly, letting the tension simmer without pushing it away. My dad used to say wine's just fermented grapes, she said. But he still cried opening a bottle from the year I was born. Braden raised his glass. He sounds like someone worth knowing. He was. He taught me to look past what's obvious. After dessert fig tarts drizzled with honey, they stepped outside together. The rain had lightened to a soft mist, the air carrying the scent of wet pavement and jasmine from the flower shop next door. Let me take you home, Braden said, reaching into his coat for an umbrella. I live 5 blocks away. I don't care. You're not walking alone in this. She hesitated, then let him open the umbrella and fall into step beside her. You always take control like this? She asked, glancing sideways. No. Only when I care what happens. They walked in silence for a while. The sound of their steps echoed down the empty street, and under the umbrella their arms brushed once, then again. You're different than I expected, she said. How did you expect me to be? Arrogant. Detached. Someone who buys things because he doesn't know how to earn them. He looked at her, rain speckling the edge of his jaw. I've earned everything. but I've never wanted anything I couldn't buy until now. She stopped walking, her breath catching slightly. You don't even know me, she said quietly. I'm trying to, he said. Oriana stared at him for a beat, then reached for the umbrella handle. Her fingers brushed his warm, steady. Good night, Brayden. He didn't try to follow. Just watched her disappear into the soft glow of her building's entry light, the scent of rain and jasmine lingering. He stood there for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to the car waiting at the curb, his driver already holding the door open. As the city blurred past the windows, Brayden leaned back, eyes closed, and for the first time in a decade, he wasn't thinking about strategy. He was thinking about her. Brayden stared at the wine bottle in his hand like it might answer something. He was standing in the middle of a high-end boutique wine shop in Tribeca, one of the few places that carried rare vintages from obscure vineyards Oriana had once mentioned during their third dinner. He hadn't told her, he remembered. He hadn't needed to. Sir, would you like that wrapped? The shopkeeper asked, gesturing toward the bottle. Brayden nodded once. Have it delivered. I'll write the note. As he stepped to the counter and took the offered pen, his phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He ignored it. He hadn't forgotten the quarterly earnings call scheduled for this afternoon, but right now spreadsheets felt like static. His focus was somewhere else entirely. The last 2 weeks had unfolded like a slow, deliberate unraveling. Dinners that stretched past midnight, her laughter breaking through his carefully guarded silences, long walks through neighborhoods he'd never noticed before. He'd even found himself in a pottery studio last weekend, hands covered in clay, apron tied crookedly around his waist because Oriana had dared him to try something that didn't come with a bottom line. He hadn't won that dare, but he'd watched her mold a crooked bowl and beam at it like it was gold. And somehow that had felt like winning. When he arrived at his penthouse, the scent of lemon oil and fresh cypress hit him before he opened the door fully. His housekeeper had been through. He stepped inside, removed his coat, and loosened his collar. The skyline glittered beyond the 20-foot windows, but he didn't look at it. He walked straight to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. He was late. He hadn't told her why. He didn't know how to. He picked up the phone, hesitated, then set it down again. The knock came just after 7. He opened the door and froze. Oriana stood there, curls slightly damp from the wind. A plain canvas tote slung over one shoulder. I was halfway through prepping dinner when I realized I didn't feel like eating alone, she said simply. He stepped aside, wordless. She walked in, dropped the bag on the kitchen island, and started unpacking. Garlic, fresh pasta wrapped in butcher paper, a small wedge of Parmesan. You were supposed to come over, she said, not looking at him. I figured I'd give you the benefit of the doubt. Brayden leaned against the counter, watching her. I got caught at the office. I figured. I also bought you a bottle of that Slovenian Pinot you mentioned 2 weeks ago. That made her pause. You listened. I always do. She dropped the pasta into boiling water and stirred, then finally turned to face him. I don't want to become someone who waits for you to remember I exist between meetings. You won't. You already didn't show up tonight. I didn't forget. Then why didn't you call? He exhaled slowly. Because I was trying to figure out if I could keep doing this without failing you. Her brow furrowed. What does that mean? I've never, he began, then trailed off, looking away. I've never let someone stand this close to my life without controlling every detail around them. That's how I survive. That's how I keep everything from falling apart. She walked closer, the scent of roasted garlic clinging to her. I'm not something you need to manage, she said. I'm not your quarterly risk assessment. I know. That's the problem, he said, voice low. You're something real. And I've spent years building walls so nothing real could reach me. She studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she reached up and touched his jaw, just briefly. You can't keep me outside the walls and expect me to stay. I'm not asking you to stay outside, he said. I'm asking you to give me time to tear them down the right way. A silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. Then she turned back to the stove. The pasta's almost ready. He watched her grate cheese over the bubbling pot, stir with practiced ease. It grounded him more than any boardroom win ever had. After they ate standing at the island, sharing bites and not speaking of missed dinners again, he walked her to the elevator. As the doors opened, she stepped in, then turned. "So what now?" she asked. "I'll figure it out." "That's not an answer." "I know. But it's an honest start." She held his gaze for a moment. Then the doors closed between them. Braden stood there long after the elevator had descended. Then he walked back into his penthouse, dimmed the lights, and pulled up a file on his tablet. He didn't look at spreadsheets. Instead, he opened a browser and searched for vineyard properties near the Hudson Valley. Not because he needed another investment, but because he needed something new, something real to begin. Braden adjusted his tie as he stepped onto the rooftop of his newly opened Hudson Valley vineyard. The early evening sun lit the horizon in soft amber, casting gold across the endless rows of vines below. The private opening was invitation only, a curated list of investors, sommeliers, and a few press contacts. Everyone mingled beneath string lights and white canopies, sipping from stemware etched with the newly unveiled name, Ames Dorsey Estates. He hadn't told Oriana what the vineyard would be called. Not yet. She hadn't arrived. He moved through the crowd, exchanging practiced nods and clipped greetings, but his attention flicked constantly to the elevator doors at the far end of the terrace. Every time they opened, his jaw tensed, then loosened again when she didn't appear. "Braden," came a voice behind him. "You've outdone yourself." He turned toward his lead architect, who raised a glass and gestured toward the sleek stone and glass tasting room behind them. He barely heard the compliment. "Excuse me." The elevator chimed. She stepped out in a navy dress, her curls swept into a loose twist. She wore no jewelry beyond a slim silver bracelet, and her expression was unreadable as her eyes scanned the space. Then they found his. Braden didn't wait. He crossed the rooftop in long strides, ignoring the curious glances. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You named it after me," Oriana said quietly, looking past him at the etched signage above the tasting room doors. "I didn't name it after you," he corrected. "I named it with you." She blinked. "I bought the land a week after that night you showed up with pasta and told me not to keep you outside the walls," he said. "I didn't want to own something else. I wanted to build something with you in it. You never said. I never say anything until I know I can follow through." He exhaled, the weight of restraint falling away. "I didn't want to be the man who showed up late again. I wanted to be the one who showed up first." Oriana looked at the vineyard, then back at him. "It's beautiful. It's yours too." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You don't owe me any of this." "I know." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "But I want to give it to you anyway." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of the unspoken, of the ache that had lived between them since that elevator door closed 2 weeks ago. She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time since that night, her defenses softened. "What happens next?" she asked. "I stop pretending I don't already know how I feel," Braden said. "I'm in love with you, Oriana. I've been building empires for years, but none of it ever made me feel the way you do when you talk about wine and forget the world." Her lips parted slightly. "You're not afraid of saying it? I'm more afraid of not saying it." She searched his eyes for a long moment. Then, finally, she smiled slow and certain. "I love you too." The evening air shifted, warm and full of promise. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black box, not because he'd planned some grand proposal for tonight, but because he'd been carrying it for days, unable to imagine waiting for the perfect moment when every moment with her already felt like one. He opened it. Inside sat a ring, platinum, understated, with a single oval-cut diamond. Not flashy, not loud, but purposeful. Like her. Her breath caught. "I don't want a ceremony to impress strangers," he said. "I want a life with you. One where we don't have to guess what we mean or wonder if the other person is all in." "You're serious," she whispered. "Always." Her eyes shimmered. "Ask me. Marry me, Oriana Ames. Not because it makes sense on paper, not because it's what people expect, but because I want to wake up every day knowing I get to love you without apology." She didn't hesitate. Yes. When she said it, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't have to be. It was real, and that made it the most powerful thing he'd ever heard. He slid the ring onto her finger as the crowd behind them finally noticed what was happening. A soft cheer rose, but Braden barely heard it. He leaned in, kissed her gently, and the rest of the world fell away. Later, after the toasts and congratulations, they stood at the edge of the terrace overlooking the vineyard. The moon lit the fields in silver. "You know," Oriana said, leaning into his side, "you still don't like wine." "I do now." She laughed. "Liar. I love the woman who taught me how to taste it. That counts for something." She looked up at him. "It counts for everything." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I meant what I said. You claimed my heart. I'm not taking it back." She rested her head against his chest, the vineyard stretching out like a promise beneath them. And this time he didn't just smile. He stayed. Oriana's heels sank slightly into the soft earth as she stepped down the gravel path between the vineyard rows, the late spring air thick with honeysuckle and the distant hum of bees. She tucked a stray curl behind her ear, her gaze following the neat lines of vines climbing up the hillside. In the distance, the new winery building gleamed under the sun, its modern sloped roof blending into the landscape like it had always been there. Braden stood at the base of the hill, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand as he listened to one of the contractors explain the irrigation updates. His stance was relaxed, but Oriana could tell he was already calculating next steps in his head. She paused, watching him from a distance, heart thudding heavier than it had any right to. She hadn't imagined this life. Not like this. Certainly not with a man like him. But here she was, standing on land that bore her name, with a man who never once asked her to be less. Braden turned, his eyes landing on her instantly. He handed the clipboard back, murmured something to the contractor, and started toward her. "You're early," he said as he reached her, brushing a thumb across her cheek. "I thought you had a tasting tour this morning. I canceled it." His brow lifted. "Everything okay? I wanted to be here. That's all." He studied her a moment, then took her hand. "Come on. I want to show you something." They walked in silence, the breeze tugging gently at her dress as they followed a side trail that curved through a grove of cypress trees, their trunks tall and narrow like sentinels. The path opened up to a clearing where a modest stone cottage sat beneath a wide oak, its shutters painted a soft green. Oriana blinked. "What is this?" Braden reached into his pocket and pulled out a single key, placing it in her palm. "The original caretaker's house. It's been here since the first vines were planted. I had it restored." "For who?" "For us." She stared at the cottage, then at him. "You did all this without telling me?" "I wanted it to be a surprise. A place that's just ours. No investors. No guests. No meetings." He looked suddenly unsure, the most unguarded she'd ever seen him. If it's too much, she cut him off by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around his waist, her cheek against his chest. "You don't have to keep proving anything," she whispered. "You already did." He exhaled into her hair, arms tightening around her. They spent the rest of the afternoon inside the cottage, walking from room to room as sunlight spilled across the new hardwood floors and the scent of fresh paint lingered in the corners. The kitchen was small, but perfect. The bedroom held a view of the vineyard below. And on the mantel above the stone fireplace sat a single-framed photograph, Oriana, wine glass in hand, laughing at something off camera. She hadn't even known he'd taken it. That night, after the sun had dipped behind the hills and the world turned quiet, they sat on the porch steps, a blanket wrapped around their shoulders, her head tucked against his shoulder. "I didn't think I'd ever feel at home again," she said softly. "Not really." "You are," he murmured. "You're home to me, too." She turned her face up toward his. "Do you remember what you said the first night we met?" "I said wine doesn't reveal itself to people who watch from a distance." She smiled. "And you said I made wine sound like poetry. You still do." Their kiss was unhurried, full of everything they hadn't needed to say to know it was real. A year later, the vineyard's first full production season opened to critical acclaim. Bottles bearing the Ames Dorsey label were displayed in boutique shops and high-end restaurants across the country. But the biggest change wasn't in the wine, it was in them. Oriana's wine workshops now had a waitlist stretching for months, and Braden had stepped back from his corporate obligations to co-run the estate full-time. He didn't miss boardrooms. Not once. On a warm June morning, they exchanged vows under the same oak tree beside the cottage. Only 30 guests were invited: close friends, family, and a few people who had weathered the early days of their story. Braden stood beneath the branches in a dark linen suit, his gaze never leaving Oriana as she walked toward him barefoot, her dress simple but flowing like summer wind. "I never thought the man I met in a wine class would become the one I couldn't live without," she said as she reached him. "I never thought the woman who challenged me at every turn would be the one who made me want to stop running," he replied. Their rings were simple, a band of brushed gold for him, a thin platinum circle for her, engraved on the inside with the word real, a nod to the moment everything changed. They kissed as the breeze lifted through the trees, and the guests rose, clapping, cheering, some crying. Later, under the stars, Oriana danced barefoot in the grass while Braden poured wine and laughed more than he ever had in his life. The vineyard glowed under the lights, the air full of music and warmth. As the night wore on, he pulled her into his arms, their bodies swaying in slow rhythm beneath the moonlight. "This is the life I didn't know I needed," he whispered. She rested her forehead against his. "And the love I never thought I'd find." They didn't talk about forever. They didn't need to. They were already living it.